first of all, my name's John Hall. Some of you have probably seen me here at previous events. And I'm here with Russ Henry, who is also a technical certification developer in the certification group at VMware. And then in the back is Melissa Tweed, who's a senior manager of the technical certification group. We are here primarily today to talk about the VMware Certified Advanced Professional Certifications. And so let me get past the wonderful disclaimer page. Of course, there's some stuff that we'll be talking about here that's still in development, so we won't be able to, on some of those things, to give exact dates here and there, but we'll do what we can, where we can. And so here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off by giving you the current status of where we are today with certification. Then we're going to get into the hierarchy. We've had for a long time our foundation level certification, which is VCP, right? And then we came out with this fairly elite level certification, our VCDX, and now we have this in between. So we have this fairly stable hierarchy. We want to talk a little bit to you about that, and then we want to get into those three levels that are in the hierarchy: the professional level, the VCP, the advanced professional, and the certifications that we have there, and then the VCDX. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about some of the tools and things that belong with those various certifications. And we'll spend a little time with some questions and see if we can't answer some of the questions that you might have today. All right, from a status perspective, VCP, we're happy to say, is still very strong in the industry, and that's because there's a lot of demand driven by our customers, right? We're looking at virtualization in the billions of dollars by 2011, and those customers specifically come back and say, we want people that are vendor certified, and being as how we are the leader in virtualization, then they want folks that are certified with VMware. And so we continue to be able to provide those certifications. We're number 6 in the top 10 list, most profitable vendor certifications, number 7 in the top 7 list. That's an end-user-based list of certifications that are desirable. And we've had a number of really good quotes. There's one here that's basically saying, if you have it, you're pretty much in with your average consultant group. We have over 52,000 VCPs. We have 45 VCDX, and of course those numbers continue to grow. On May the 24th of this year, we announced our advanced certifications, VMware Certified Advanced Professional, and we announced 2 of those certifications, the first one being the VCAP4 which is our Datacenter Administration exam, which is focused on advanced administration of a vSphere environment. And then we have the Datacenter Design exam, which is focused on designing those types of environments. And more on that we're going to be talking about, of course. The VCAP4 we started beta testing that particular certification in June, and we will be going GA with that exam on the 13th of this month. The VCDX4 path, we announced the path for that. We've had, of course, the VCDX3 for some time. So we announced the new path, which includes the new certifications, on the 24th as well. And we've got some upgrade options so that if folks were either in progress already on VCDX3 or had already achieved VCDX3 and want to go to VCDX4, there's some options available there. And we'll cover that more. All right, of course, there's a number of benefits that come along with being certified, and we're working more and more on expanding the benefits that are available to our VCPs and our VCAPs and our VCDXs. So some of the stuff that you see here, of course, you're probably already aware of. We've got a certified professional logo or badge, so depending on what level you are, you can include the appropriate logo on your business cards and your website. Access to beta exams and beta courses, discounted admission to VMware events, certification logo wear. We've for a long time wanted to have this, and it is coming soon to a location near you. So hopefully we'll have that available to you real soon. What's that? Target. Don't we wish, right? No, but probably to a website, like a VMware website near you pretty soon. Press release support, of course, directory listing, and our communities. All right, this is the hierarchy that we were talking about. At the base level of the hierarchy is the professional level. This is where right now today the VMware Certified Professional exam is, and it's the foundation, right, to grow on. At the mid-level, we have the advanced professional, and that's where we're looking for folks that have had maybe more experience in the industry, a way to differentiate professionals that have specialized maybe in administration or design or other areas of expertise in virtualization. And then we've got that expert level, those folks that are consulting in specific high areas, and we'll talk a little bit more about what differentiates those as we get to those sections. So here's the VCP, right? At this professional level, we're talking about administrators or implementers with 2 to 5 years of IT experience, 6 months of virtualization experience. So a foundation, right? Someone that's been doing general administration for a while but is relatively new to virtualization but has about 6 months of experience in the field, has achieved one of our courses. And so we have some authorized courses. You must attend a course as part of this foundation level, right? It is the only level that we require a course in today, right? But at that level, you would either go with Install, Configure, Manage or vSphere Fast Track, or if you already have that level of experience, and maybe you are somebody that's more on the 5 years of IT experience side, and you've been doing VMware for a while, you already know all the basic installation configuration stuff, so you want to fulfill your course requirement, but you don't want to go through and learn a bunch of stuff you already know. So we have troubleshooting as an option for folks that are more experienced that want to achieve this foundation level. All right, once you have that course requirement in place, you pass the exam, and you attain the certification. Now, the advanced level certification, the VMware Certified Advanced Professional, this is there for a reason. I mean, we had significant demand both from customers out there that deploy solutions, but also from VCPs that wanted a way to distinguish their skill sets. There are some VCPs that have been doing this for a year. There are some VCPs that have been doing it for 5 years. And maybe those folks that have been doing it for 5 years specialize more in doing, advanced level administrations of large environments, or maybe they do more design-oriented stuff. And so a way to distinguish those folks, that's where this level of certification comes from. And for this particular level, we look for an existing VCP, right? So for the VCAP, DCA, VCAP4 DCA, VCAP4 DCD, you need to start off by being a VCP4 in the first place, right? And then to achieve those certifications, you take the associated exams. Now, there is not a course requirement for this level, but there are courses that are available to help prep, right? Courses in different areas of the objectives that we look for in these exams. So I want to start off in this advanced section by talking about the Data Center Administration exam. I'm going to talk about it for a little bit. We'll look at a demo of what it looks like, and then Russ is going to come up and talk to you about the Data Center Design exam. The Data Center Administration exam is for individuals that do administration of larger, more complex environments, right, that have been doing a VMware environment administration for quite some time, right? So we're looking for more advanced level skills than you might have in somebody that just knows how to install or configure a basic environment. People that can do automation, people that can integrate some of the more advanced products, right? Some of those kinds of things. The way that we test for competence in this area is we use an exam that consists of a number of live lab activities. The activities are performed in an actual vSphere environment that consists of hosts and vCenter server and the related products, a number of pre-built VMs in various states that give us an opportunity to actually see if a person is capable of performing those advanced administration tasks. All right, so this is what the path looks like. You start off as a VCP, that's on the left-hand side there, right? Then the courses that are available include troubleshooting, manage for performance, manage and design for security, and automation with vSphere Power CLI. These are the 4 courses that are available today that cover some of the various objectives in the exam. So those courses are available. They're not required as it shows here. But if maybe an administrator, for example, does a lot of performance, a lot of troubleshooting, but doesn't do a lot of security. So they want to go and take a look at that content so that they're familiar with those particular objectives. Then those courses are available. Yeah, question?
Are these instructor-led or are these online?
These are all instructor-led courses. Now, I should point out that all of our, well, not all, but a number of our instructor-led courses are available in a live online format. so that you still have an instructor, you still have other folks in the class, you still have live activities in a lab environment, but you're doing it online as opposed to having to go someplace. Right? So we do have that available for a number. On these, I'm not sure all of these that are live online. We'd have to go and look and see which ones are, which ones aren't. All right, so prep on whichever courses you want, then go and take the exam, pass the exam, and that gives you the VCAP4 DCA credential. Now, a little bit more about the exam itself. It's a number of live lab activities that make up this exam across those different objective areas. And approximately right now, we're looking at maybe about 40 activities, but that could change because each individual activity could be more or less complex, right? We could have you in one activity performing some kind of configuration on a VM. We could have in another activity you installing a component like vShield zones. One's going to take much longer than the other, right? So depending on the number and type of activities, could be 40, could be a little less, a little bit more. Each activity has multiple tasks, and depending on the kinds of tasks that you perform to complete the activity, each activity may consist of one or more scoring opportunities. And those scoring opportunities collectively make up the exam and whether or not you have the ability to pass that exam successfully. The passing score will be determined by beta results. The exam's been in beta. We haven't, as we said, released it GA yet, but that'll be coming on the 13th. And so the score that we require when we GA will be based on the results of those beta examinations. Time allowed for the exam is about 4 hours. Again, we're fine-tuning that based on the results of the beta. In countries where English isn't the primary language, there's a little bit of extra time involved there, as you can see. And you schedule this exam through Pearson VUE, like our other exams, right? So you can go to Pearson VUE to schedule the exam once it opens for GA later this month. If you fail this exam, you can take it again. I'll get that in just a sec. You just need to wait X number of days, and the X number here is 10. Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was, do we look for a specific way for you to complete an activity? And the answer is no. We look to see that the activity was successfully completed. How you got there doesn't really matter to us. Some administrators maybe, for example, are much more command line focused than others. That doesn't matter to us as long as you get the job done, right? Right.
So given that, taking the version 3 of the exam, it seems like the only real way to get a score on this is for someone to actually watch a recording of everything you did during the exam. Is that really how it's scored?
Okay. Well, so I don't know that I want to go into a lot of depth on that, but let me give you the basics here, right? Anytime an item is completed, let's say that what I wanted you to do was something, it wouldn't be quite this simple, but let's say I wanted you to build a VM with certain characteristics. What I could do after you're done is go using some kind of command line or scripting technique to determine if the VM was there and if the VMX file contained those characteristics. That's the kind of thing that we do in order to determine if something was successfully completed. So the way that we develop those techniques, it's possible for us to score the exam fairly quickly, much more quickly than you would have seen like in the enterprise exam days, right? And our goal eventually is to be able to have you get a score pretty quickly from the time that you passed, right? I would imagine maybe initially out the door it might take us a little bit longer because we'll still be making sure that all of that stuff comes back and is resolved correctly. All right, so what I want to do here is briefly talk to you about the objectives that we're looking for in the administration exam, okay? And so what we want, first of all, on this page, you can see in these sections of the exam that we're looking to make sure that you have an advanced level of administrative capability in managing storage and managing networking. On the storage side, we want to make sure that you can handle capacity, handle complex storage solutions, handle multipathing, and the ability to install or manage plugins on the PSA side. For networking, that you can handle VLAN administration, private VLANs, scale out virtual networking, work with distributed switches, migrate back and forth maybe from standard switches to distributed switches, stuff like that. In section 3, we're looking for DRS clustering, performance management, so how you handle resources, how you optimize them, how you tune, what to do if there's a problem there, of course, using performance monitoring tools to figure out what kind of performance characteristics an environment has. Section 4, we're looking for business continuity, data protection, so deploying, working with FT, working with vCenter Server Heartbeat, configuring clustering. And I want to point out, because we get some questions sometimes about MSCS, that our goal in this section is for you to understand what you'd have to do from a virtual machine hardware perspective to get clustering deployed. We don't care that you know how to install MSCS, that's a Microsoft thing. We just care that you know how to deploy the virtual machine so that it can be done. Okay? Complex VMware HA solutions, sure, that kind of thing. Section 5, we're talking about operational maintenance, so whether or not you can handle update manager, patching, host profiles, that kind of thing. Section 6, we're looking at advanced troubleshooting, so analyzing log files, troubleshooting performance issues, troubleshooting connectivity issues across the resource types, right? Networking, storage, CPU, resources. In Section 7, we're looking at securing a vSphere environment. So working with securing ESX hosts, ESXi hosts for ESX, being able to manage the firewall, working with vShield zones to manage those types of edge firewalls in ESXi type of environments. Section 8, we're looking at scripting and automation, the ability to do some basic scripting using PowerCLI. The vSphere Management Assistant, which of course has the vSphere CLI as a part of that component, and being able to utilize those tools, and the ability to administer vCenter Orchestrator. And then finally in Section 9, we're looking at the ability to do some custom scripting in terms of deploying ESX and ESXi, vCenter Server Linked Mode, and the ability to do more complex installations of ESX or ESXi with custom settings. Now, everything that I've just talked to you about is weighted according to a process that we go through when we develop the exam. So some of the stuff that I've shown you here is much more important than other pieces that we've talked about here. So if you're looking at that going, oh yeah, I can see how DRS is really important, but is vCenter Orchestrator that important? We've had a group similar to what we have right here, a group of VCPs that are experienced, that have gone through VCP4, that helped us develop and survey the results of this and determine what the weighting of these different sections are. All right, now I mentioned there were recommended courses. So the first one here is Managed for Performance, vSphere Managed for Performance. This is a 3-day course. It's hands-on. It covers the performance impact of using different monitor modes. It covers the use of different vSphere tools to monitor performance, how to diagnose performance-related issues, how to do tuning to get optimal configuration. And the bottom line, which is what you're seeing in bold at the bottom here, is it covers the performance-related objectives that are on this I'll get the word out in a minute, VDCA410 exam, right? The vSphere troubleshooting course is a 4-day hands-on course that's designed to troubleshoot the different hardware objectives, so networking, storage, HA, DRS, ESXi, and technical support mode, all of that kind of stuff. And covers, as you can see on the bottom here, the troubleshooting relative objectives for this exam, and also covers use of the vSphere Management Assistant and the vSphere CLI. If you need more on the security-related objectives on this exam, then the Manage and Design for Security course is a 3-day hands-on course that provides some of the best practices for designing and deploying security in a vSphere environment. And then finally, the Automation with vSphere PowerCLI is a 2-day hands-on course that deals with working with PowerCLI and scripting and the automation for cluster operations, virtual machine provisioning, and that kind of thing. So if you're not that up on PowerCLI or automation, then this covers the objectives that we look for on the exam related to those areas. All right, so we mentioned that this is a live lab. So this is how it works. You go to take the exam, and you're going to a Pearson VUE testing center. When you get to the testing center, you sit down at the station. You're presented with a number of tasks. Each task is a description of the activity that you have to perform. When you go to perform the task, so here we are, go to perform the task, you switch into the live lab, which is in our virtual data center. We have data center hardware that's out here in California, in Oregon, over on the lovely West Coast. And so you're attaching into that stuff, and then you're actually performing these activities in that environment. All right, the desktop that you attach into, which is a desktop that provides icons, and we're going to look at it in just a second here, for things like the client and for PuTTY to have secure shell access, that kind of thing. The desktop allows access in to the ESX host, to the vCenter server, and to the virtual machines that you'll need to work with in order to complete these tasks successfully. Okay, so let's take a look. Yes, of course. Yeah, gotta love how Flash objects work in this. So give me a moment, you guys. Yeah, this should be all good. Oh, unless they change, I think they changed the folder names location. So hold on just a second, let me capture that. There we go. All right, so we have this demo. This will be posted fairly shortly up on our web. And what I'd like to do is just briefly run you through kind of a speeded up version of this demonstration of the environment. Now, the first thing you're doing if you're going to Pearson and you're sitting down at a station ready to take this exam is you're going to be presented with some instructions. And that's what you're seeing here. And the instructions involve kind of talking a little bit about what's going to be available to you, what kind of things you're going to run into in the lab environment, and some of the key things you want to note here. When you perform tasks in this environment, it is a live running environment. So if I did something in an earlier task, then we might be later on in the exam expecting that you did that already, right? And if you didn't perform that task successfully, later on you're going to be looking for it going, where's this, right? So you can go back, of course, to any previous activity that you would have completed and check it if it's not been completed successfully to make sure that that subsequent item gets completed correctly. When you first get to this front page, you'll give information on as you can see on the bottom here with host names, passwords, login information. And then once you're ready to take the exam, there's the little begin lab that you can see here on the bottom, right? And so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, good. All right, so here you can see an example of a question. On this side, you're looking at the tasks that you have to perform. You'll get a description of the task. You'll get those credentials again so that if you need to see them at any time, you'll know what you need to log in. Then, in order to perform the task, you go over to the live lab environment. So you can see we just switched there. We need to connect to the desktop. If you get a warning, you click Connect to continue. And here's the desktop. You log in with the credentials that you're given. And then what you'll see is the student desktop. Now on this desktop, there's a vSphere client that you can use to access the environment. There's a shortcut to PuTTY so that you can do SSH sessions. There's a remote desktop so you can connect directly to VMs if you want. And there's a folder that contains all of the vSphere documentation. Now, you wouldn't want to spend a lot of time looking at that stuff, but we don't expect you to know every command line syntax option either. So we give you access to that information so that you can get it. All right, so let's switch back to the item so that we can see what we're supposed to do here. What you can see in this item is that we're supposed to configure a shared repository for vCenter Update Manager. The repository is in a folder called Patches on the Update Manager virtual machine. We need to configure Update Manager to support the local repository. So let's go back and do it. First thing we're going to do is log into the client. All right, we're in. We're going to go to the Home section and scroll down and go to Solutions and Applications, and then go to Update Manager. In Update Manager, we'd go to the Configuration tab, and then we'd go to the Patch Download Settings. And there's a spot here where you can plug in a local repository. So we're going to scroll down, say Use a Shared Repository, plug in the directory that we just saw, validate the URL to ensure that it's there, and then download those patches. So we apply it. We're going to go Download Now. We'd see it in the task list on the bottom here that it's been completed. And then we can verify the patches are there by going back to the Baselines and Groups tab. And in that tab, we would see content for the fixed and dynamic baselines. So you can see here for critical hosts, non-critical hosts, that we have content listed, which indicates that we have accessed our repository successfully. So this is an example of what the lab looks like. This is one item, right? So you'd be then progressing on to the next task, performing that, and continuing on. All right, so before we go into the data center design section, I'm going to have Russ come up and talk to you about that. Any questions on the VCAP4 DCA certification exam? Yes. Right now, today, it's strictly lab activities. Now, we haven't ruled out the idea that maybe at some point we'd have something you need to know that we couldn't do in the lab. But if we can do it in the lab, it's going to be in the lab. Yep. Can you Google? No, you cannot. There is no access to that. We run Internet Explorer in a kiosk mode so that you can't pull up other sessions. But like we said, we do give you all the manuals. So really, if it's something that is in any of the books, you're going to be able to find it. But yeah, you can't just go out and Google. No, yeah, actually we ought to give you points if you manage to figure out how to do it in the system. There's a question over here? Yes. So that's a good question, and let me answer that one, okay? We get questions a lot of times on this, and it's really hard, I think, for us to manage expectations when we move from one revision to another. If it's a minor revision, what we try to do is make sure that items in our certifications are common across the revisions. So for this particular environment, because it's a hardware installation, you're going to look at it. It was developed in 4.0, and it'll remain in 4.0 for a fair amount of time here. Now, at some time, maybe if we went to like 4.5 and there was a huge amount of difference, then we'd be revving it at that point. But 4.1, all it really did was introduce a couple of new things, and we're maintaining consistency between 4.0 and 4.1 right now. So.
With that said, is this going to be a test of what we know, or is it going to be a test to try the tricks?
That's a good question. Here's what I would say about that first. This kind of test is hard to do the tricky way, right? Because it's tasks you have to perform in the environment. And it should be tasks that you'd actually run across in real life, and we've tried to do that as much as possible. Now, in a text-based exam, it's easier to trick, right? You could write a trick question. It's a little harder to do it in a live lab activity. You'd have to really create something screwy that you wouldn't see in real life, and we're not doing that.
How many tasks do you get?
It's about 40 more or less, and each task can have multiple pieces to it. Okay? The exam itself, like we said, right now we don't have the exact time frame, but you're looking at around 4 hours. And we're trying not to get too much past that. We may be able to come down a little bit from that, but that's about the time frame you're looking at. All the documentation in terms of our PDF manuals for any manual that's related to what we're doing here. Right? So you get the whole ESX set, ESXi set, the VMA documentation, update manager, etc.
Is there a single location so when you're studying for the exam, you can say, all right, I'm ready to kind of simulate myself taking the exam. Here's the user manual that I'll have available. You know you're at yourself.
So here's, that's a great question. Let me tell you what I can about that. We have a thing that we call the exam blueprint guide. Right? The exam blueprint guide contains all of the objectives that we looked at, but also for each objective has the documentation relevant to that objective and has links that hyperlink to the PDFs, right? So you can use that to gather all the documentation that you might need. There's a section towards the end that also talks about how you would deploy a lab environment yourself if you wanted to be able to test yourself, right? And we talk about how to do it using products that you could get in evaluation mode, so it's not like a cost-oriented thing, really, unless you didn't have hardware at all, right? And then it might be a little bit more difficult.
You won't have a list of, here's the manual
It's the same. It's going to be, yeah, I mean, the manuals that you see in that exam blueprint guide, those are the manuals that'll be in the folder. Yes. Good. It's so good. Yeah, I'm sorry. Back. I'll get you, Jeff. Sorry.
I've noticed some other non-vSphere included applications in the list. Is that
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question. And let me talk about where that comes from, too. So when we developed this exam, we went out and talked to experienced administrators that were VCP4s and had been a VCP for a fairly long amount of time. And we said, what do you think you need to know to be an advanced administrator? And we got all that information back, and we used that to build this. And so there were a few pieces that are outside of the core suite, right? Things like vShield zones, which is actually part of the licensing, but it's not necessarily part of whatever version of the license you might have, right? So a couple of things like that. The ones that come to mind in particular would be vShield zones, vCenter server heartbeat, linked mode, which is, it's in there, but you wouldn't necessarily see that in all environments. The key to this was, we went and said, if you're in a larger, more complex type of environment that you're administering, these things would be there, is generally what the consensus was. So you'll see some stuff on there. Now, as I said, from a weighting standpoint, those pieces are relatively low weighted compared to the other things that you need to know. Okay?
Have you thought about the upgrade path in terms of when there is a VCAP 5, are we going to need to take a new VCP exam and a new design exam and a new administrator exam? It's going to get really expensive.
Well, okay, let me tell you how we're handling it with one of our tracks. Okay, that's the one I can tell you that we've already said today, which is the VCDX4 track, right? If you've gone through all the components for VCDX4, which in order to obtain VCDX4, you had to do VCP, you had to do enterprise, you had to do design, you had to do a defense, right? So for VCDX4, someone that has already obtained VCDX3 doesn't have to do every single one of those things again. Right now we're saying you have to do the version 4 of the design exam, and that's going to give you the qualification. So we look at that, we consider that. I couldn't tell you today, right, when the next version comes out, what we're going to do right now. But we'd be looking at, you know, something that's going to be as streamlined as we could make it under the circumstances, right? Yeah. Yeah, let me get you first.
You mentioned that the exams will get general availability on the 13th, or at least the one from the data center administration.
That's right, data center administration. I'm gonna let Russ tell you when that's going to be.
Is the DCA exam being offered here at VMworld, and is it still beta therefore, or is it not being offered?
It's being offered, but it's being offered to a set of previous beta candidates. The first version of our beta had some issues at the centers where they were being taken, where there was some where there were some display-related anomalies. And so those folks had a relatively bad beta experience. We wanted to give them a chance to take it again. And based on the seating, that was really all we had availability for at VMworld here. So that's... No, not, yeah, and it won't be until, as we said, the 13th, right? Yeah, you got it. All right, let me take two more, and then I want to let Russ get up and talk with you a little bit, okay? So, yep.
With that display channel, how is that accommodated for, I mean, we've all taken exams where because the computer suddenly dies on you. Say you're two and a half hours into this exam.
Right.
You're not going to feel like going back to that same thing that happened.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is that we probably can't, anticipate every possible anomaly that could happen. But what we can do is make sure that the testing centers that we utilize for the exam have the appropriate hardware, have the right software in order to be able to connect and provide a good experience. And it took us a little work to get that done, but we're getting that done. And we'll make sure that the centers that offer this exam have the right hardware, have the right software in order to give you the best possible experience there. Yeah.
So for the VCAP DCA exam, or even for the VCE exams in the past, the Enterprise Administration exams, we only had those in Pearson Professional Centers, which only gives you limited access, right? There were only 5 in Western Europe available. So we did run them only in the Pearson Professional Centers. We're working with Pearson VUE right now because we had screen resolution requirements, we had internet connectivity requirements. So we worked with Pearson VUE, ran them in the PPCs. We've had a relatively good experience in that environment, higher security. for us protecting our IP. We're working with Pearson VUE right now on expanding to some of their Pearson Select sites, which have the higher security in their centers, have more definitely tested bandwidth, latency, and connectivity opportunities. So we're right now working with Pearson VUE to expand to add the sites in 40 more countries throughout the world and 66 testing centers. So we're adding another 24 testing centers in Europe, 24 in the Americas, including Latin America, 30 in Europe, and 12 right now in Asia Pac, which will continue to work with them to meet that demand. So we're very much worried about that experience. We don't want people to go, and especially with the enterprise test and the design test in the past, they actually had to fly to locations, so there was travel involved. We're trying to get better access for individuals, so we're going to put them in more sites, but we're also going to do a lot of regression testing before we launch those other select centers. So there will be. So what we're going to do on September 13th, we'll list all the different locations where the test is available currently. And then as sites roll out, so we've got about 5 more in Latin America that are already regression test over the last few weeks. So they're ready to go. So we'll post them there so that you guys, especially internationally, people can start planning and say, I don't need to, do 2 days of traveling to Frankfurt to take the test because it's going to be in Moscow, in December. So.
All right, what I'd like to do is let me have Russ come up, talk to you guys about the data center design exam, right, which is also a real cool thing for us. Let you get some information about that. And then if we have more questions, we're going to be here. We'll be able to talk to you. We'll probably have some time at the end, too. All right?
Hello, everyone. So again, my name is Russ Henry. I'm a colleague of John's. I'm another one of the certification developers. Can everyone see me okay? All right. I've been listening to this thing creak under John. I'm like, I don't think I want to risk it. So all right. So data center design is the second half of VCAP4, and what this is going to do is it's going to try to target the people who have special skills in terms of design. Right? VCP is very, very broad. It covers all of the folks that have taken the install and configure, but a lot of you are specialists, right? Some of you are the design folks, some of you are the implementation folks, and that's really one of the reasons why VCAP is designed in 2 halves, so that we can give people special recognition for the people who know specific areas, right? So this is going to give us a way to showcase the folks who actually know their design really well. So we're talking about your IT architects, your consulting architects, the folks that do the design and know how to optimize things to make things work the best way possible for their environments. So if you want to take the DCD exam, you got to be a VCP4, you got to pass the exam, and this exam is a little bit different. So we talked VCP being the multiple choice. We talked about the live lab for DCA. DCD is going to be more of a design simulation. So we'll have Visio type diagrams where you can click and drag objects into the design, map it out for us, show us what it's supposed to look like, and really find a way to make it look more like a design rather than just more multiple choice. Okay, how many folks really hate multiple choice, sort of hate multiple choice, or never want to see multiple choice again? Okay, tough crowd, John. This is rough. All right, so other thing to remember here. Am I pointing this the right way? There it goes. No course requirements. So again, just like DCA, we're not going to make you take any courses to get this certification, but there is a recommended course. There is a design workshop I'm going to talk about in a little while here that will give you some of the additional things to think about that you'll need to take this test. All right, so we really did talk about all this already. One thing that's not up here, of course, are the dates. There is a postcard that's floating around the conference that actually says DCD is available this week. Yeah, we didn't really approve that, so that's not going to happen right now. So we have the DCA in beta here. The DCD beta should go live towards the end of the month, end of September, and the live test should come fairly quick after that. Yes?
Is it possible to take this exam before the other one, or is that a requirement?
Excellent question. The question is is there an order to this? Do I have to take DCA before I take DCD, or can I take DCD then DCA? It's an either or, so it doesn't really matter. You can take one, you can take the other. We don't care which order you take them in. And technically, you don't need them both unless you're going for VCDX, but we'll talk about the VCDX part of it later on here.
Right, so they're independent certification programs. So it's VMware Certified Advanced Professional and Data Center Administration is totally independent from the VCAP DCD. The only prerequisite, which we will enforce the prerequisite through authorization files to Pearson VUE, is that you have completed your VCP4 certification.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Would you consider DCD more difficult than DCA, and are the costs the same for both?
So the question is, which one's more difficult? And which one, and are the costs equivalent? So the answer is they're equal. They just test different levels of knowledge. All right, so it was different areas of knowledge. So as far as difficulty goes, they're about the same. Costs?
Cost of the exams, like the enterprise administration, the current design exams, the exams are $400, $400 US dollars.
One thing I would say, just elaborating on Russell's comment, is that how difficult either one of these is going to be is going to depend on what your existing skill set, right? If you're more of an admin person, you're going to find the admin one way easier than the design one if you're going to take them both. Like if you're going to go for the whole VCDX thing and you're going to take both of them, then you're going to find the one that you have the bigger skill set and more easier. But if you had no skill in either one and you were learning from the ground up, you'd find it difficult to all, like I was saying, pretty simple.
Yep.
So for $400 as well, you said that those exams are the most profitable you enter yourself.
No.
I think the VCDX, if you were looking at a profit perspective for us, but really we're more focused on, I think, what we can deliver for customers that are looking for that. But yeah, I think.
Yes, sir.
Is this exam probably geared more toward the VMware partners that are selling services for design, as opposed to the other, which is more for your hands-on administration?
So the question is this more designed for partners who do the design consulting gigs, or is this more for customers? Again, it's one of those things where we're talking about different skill sets here. We've got the implementers who are going to be the DCA folks, but even in-house, a lot of companies do have their DCD folks as well, their design folks that they don't call the consulting companies because they've got a couple folks in-house who they say, all right, we need to roll out 500 virtual machines next week. We need disaster recovery at this level. We need this type of SLA. What do we do? And this is to make sure that those people get the recognition they deserve.
What I would say about that, though, is that your consultants that design all the time, those are the ones that approach more the VCDX level, right? So this design exam is part of that track, right? But if you were maybe doing some design work, but maybe it's not your whole-time gig, then maybe you stop at the VCAP DCD, right? And then maybe it is your whole thing, and you really want to show, hey, I know what I'm doing, and you want to go through the whole VCDX thing, which will show you what else that includes, right? That's really the pinnacle for that skill set.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're often asked that same question for the VCDX. So what we're seeing with the VCDX candidates, we are seeing end users and customers from specific companies that are not part of the partner program that are pursuing their VCDX certification outside of any kind of partner requirement.
Okay. One last question, then we're going to move on here. Yes, sir.
Is this strictly the simulation, or is there also a design paper similar to the
So this is not the full defense like a VCDX. We'll talk about the VCDX4 in a second here, but this is going to be mostly simulation with some multiple choice. All right, so in fact, here we go. Let's talk about the exam itself. So this is going to be a number of design scenarios presented with some multiple choice. The exact number is still to be determined. Right? As I mentioned, the beta is coming up here, and that's going to be when we figure out the exact things like number of questions and passing scores. And the total time allowed for the exam is going to be determined. So it's typically about 1 minute to 2 minutes per question. All right, so depending on how complex the question is. What's that?
On a multiple choice item.
On the multiple choice items.
The standard is 1 minute per item.
And the simulations will allow a little bit more time. And if you're from an English-speaking country, a non-English-speaking country, which you won't understand what I'm saying right now, but that's okay. If you're from a non-English-speaking country, we give you an extra 30 minutes to scare and confuse you, thank you. Accommodate the fact that you might need a little bit of help with figuring out what you're reading, all right? And you're going to schedule this through Pearson VUE just like anything else. And like the DCA, you've got a 10-day window after that you got to wait if you fail it before you can take it again. Okay, so what types of things are going to be on here? Now, you saw a very similar set of slides when John talked about the DCA. These section listings are exactly what you're going to find in the blueprints. Right, so the exam blueprints for DCA and DCD are out on the website. So if you go to vmware.com/certification and then follow the links to the various areas, you'll find the blueprints. And so this is the document that John talked about all right, here's the sections, here are the things you need to know, here are the documentation things that you should be reading in order to complete the exam. So with the DCD, we are really walking through the process of a good design scenario here. So we're going to have a section where we talk about business requirements. Here's your scenario. You are a designer for this type of environment, and here are the requirements that you were given from your customer. Well, based on that, then you're going to start looking into things and doing the things you would do in a real-life design environment. Start figuring out what it is that the business requirements are. Based on that, all right, what applications are we going to choose, and what requirements do the applications themselves have? And then talk about the trade-offs, the risks, the assumptions that we need to work with here in order to really determine what we need to do next. Section 2 gets us into the logical design, where we actually say, all right, now that we've figured out what the customer wants and what they need, what tools do we have available to make this happen? All right, so am I going to be using, in the case of logical network, am I going to be using V-switches? Am I going to be using distributed switches? Am I going to be using a Cisco-style switch? Right? So we'll sit here and have you walk through the various environments and think about what it is that you're going to be designing here based on what we need. All right, so we go through each one of these pieces, and then we say, all right, so based on what we determined the customer needs and what the logical design is going to look like, what do we need to tell them they need to purchase? Of course, some of our folks will be telling you V-block, 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 but it just depends on what the situation is. So we'll talk about the things. All right, so given this environment, what type of storage should we be looking at? Does an iSCSI scenario fit better than a fiber channel? Or should we just be going NFS all the way? What type of networking solutions are we doing? We might throw something at you that has to do with jumbo frames. If you've got a jumbo frames requirement, how's that going to change what it is that you're going to address here? Talk about security solutions, host class, DR and backup and availability solutions. We're going to try to get you to think about all the major things that you'd have to address as you go through a real design exercise in order to make sure that this is as real world as possible. All right, then we'll talk about the physical design. Now that you've determined what features you want to use, how do you actually do it? Right, if I build a virtual switch and I want to make sure that we have the PV LANs incorporated correctly in order to segment out parts of the network so that we shield some users from other users, what types of things do you need to do? What types of choices are you going to make as you build these devices in order to make this work? And then finally, the last part is just implementation. Do you know the proper way to do testing? Do you know the types of things you should include in an implementation guide, an installation guide? Basically, can you make a run book so that you don't have to be the first person they call every time something happens? All right? Now, none of this should be that much of a surprise. If you've done design before, these are the exact same steps you've probably done, but we're just going to make sure that we test it to make sure that you know what you're talking about. So some people say, all right, well, wait a minute. So what if the way I design things is a little bit different than the way that you guys would design stuff? Well, that's a valid concern. That's one of the reasons why there's a design workshop, because we're not going to do anything really wild. We're not going to come up with some really fancy schmancy way to make it so that, as you were saying, talk about the trick questions. We're not going to say we want you to create something really, really fancy just to see if you can find that last hidden button underneath the configuration layer. But if you'd like a little bit more insight on what our consulting architects like to think about, how they approach it, there is a design workshop that was built with the help of our consulting wing to talk about how they design things. So we've got a 3-day hands-on training course that gives you the VMware way of designing things, the way that we actually approach this. All right, so this is a 3-day instructor-led course. Talks about your design goals. How do you find out what it is the customer wants? The right way to ask questions in order to get the information and level of detail that you need. How to take all the information that you've been given from a customer and make sure that we have the most important stuff so that we, I love the fact that they want a blue cabinet on this box, but is that really going to affect the design? So then we also have to make sure that we know what our alternate choices are. All right? Just because we have what looks like the best way to do something, there might be something else you need to consider also. So this is a way just to look at different things. And the big thing, of course, is identifying risks. Right? Nothing is completely without risk, but there are some things that you need to consider as you're putting this together to minimize any type of unexpected consequences here. All right, so the thing is, though, that this is the one class that we have that actually talks about the type of information. Again, it's not required. This is completely optional. The blueprint will talk about all the different documentations that this course and the test are built upon. But this is something that you can consider if you want a little bit more help here. Okay, so before we jump to the next slide here, any clarification needed on DCD? Okay, one here and then one there. Yes, sir.
I understand, obviously, you don't want to talk about it in depth as John did with the DCA, but can you talk a little bit about scoring methodologies and time frame for results? Obviously, this isn't something where as soon as you click finish, you're going to get a score, but...
Well, the thing is, so the question is, how would we score the DCD? Well, the thing is...
For the DCD, so for the DCD, so even when we do the Visio type diagrams, so we have stencils and templates, that's actually all auto-scored. So right now, when somebody takes the VCD410 exam, they actually walk away with a score report that says whether they passed or failed.
Mm-hmm. And so the 4 will be based on a very similar method. Yes, sir.
How did the workshop work? And just like they're developed, the workshop course and the test, they're developed hand in hand to pass the test?
They're not developed hand in hand, but they are developed more or less cooperatively. So I know that's a little bit unclear. The course came first. Is that correct, Melissa? The course came first?
So actually, so the course actually complements the exam. So we don't build our blueprints in our course curriculum at the same time, not for ICM and VCP, not for performance in the DCA, and not for this design. But there are a lot of similarities between the two, and in our blueprint, we call those out. So in the blueprint, when we say, this course is recommended, or where do you go to find more information about this, we'll point you to the class, or we'll point you to some product documentation.
And as far as the costs on the class, I don't know off the top of my head. The best thing to do is take a look at the VMware website, and the education link will take you to the schedule, and that'll get you the course prices. Yes, sir. Oh, so 1 then 2. Yes.
My question is actually for both exams.
You're right.
What is VMware doing to keep these separate? All of us broke our tails trying to get VCP,
Mm-hmm.
and I know a lot of us are concerned that this is going to turn VCP into the next MCP.
Okay.
And we just don't want to see what we've already done get watered down by, easier questions or people trying to break in, which is great, but for them, but not for us.
Yeah, I can assure you that will happen, right? The VCP, there's people there's actually people on the flip side that would love to see us make it easier, right? But we won't do that, right? We're looking for a certain level, a foundation level skill set, and that's not going to change. And it won't change because of this either. Really, this is here because once you're a VCP, maybe you'd like to show that you're a VCP that has, some highly developed administrative skills, and there's no way for you to do that today, right? Now there will be a way for you to do that. VCP, I think, is still going to be the first thing that most, partners, customers, they're going to be looking to see that you have at least that much, right? And then maybe some of the ones that have these larger environments will start looking at at whether or not you've been doing it a long time, whether or not you've got some of these other credentials. We won't be watered down to VCP. It's not going to happen.
Okay, so one last question here, then we've got to get through the last few slides before we're out of time here. Yes, sir.
Will it be this certification as a necessary step for partners in the future?
Determination of whether, yeah, so determination of whether it's a partner competency has not been determined at this time. I mean, as always, we're looking to how to best enable our partners and assure their skill sets and competencies. So we're looking at that, but it's not a requirement at this point in time. Correct.
Okay, so the last thing we need to talk about here as far as the types of certifications available is the VCDX. And many of you are aware of the VCDX. This is the expert level. This is the consultant level that goes out and actually is building these things in the field all the time. All right, so in order to achieve the VCDX4, again, so if you know somebody who's in the process of getting the VCDX3, we'll talk about how this affects them. But if you are not currently VCDX and you are working towards the VCDX4, what you'll do is first get your VCP4. It's baseline for everything. Then you pass DCA and DCD. Once you've passed those 3 exams, then you go ahead and submit, present, and design your defense. Right? So this is very similar to what we do now. So you have the enterprise exam, then your defense. Now it's going to be DCA and DCD prior to the defense. So, did you want to talk about the transition plans?
I mean, I can real quick. We had that question earlier, like, how much work do you have to do it all over again, right? If you were already a VCDX3, you can see it at the very bottom there. If you're already a VCDX3, you have your VCP4, all you have to do is take the design exam and you're done, right? You don't have to do another defense. You don't have to do like the DCA exam even, right? All we're looking for is the new design exam, and then we would give you that credential. If you're in progress right now, some folks that were in progress said, I just want to finish. That way I only have to do the bottom thing. But if you're in progress right now, then you could also do any of what you see here, right? Well, if I had passed the enterprise exam, then I could take the new DCA exam at a reduced cost. And then I could go on from there and take the design exam and the credentials to defense and all that from there. So we have, depending on where you are right now, we have a step for you wherever you might be in the current path.
All right, so if you are one of the folks on the path to become a VCDX, there are some defense prep resources out there for you. So a lot of people say, well, gosh, I don't even know where to start. I've been told I got to talk about a design that I implemented. What do I do? Well, there are some things you can take a look at. The courses that you take for DCA and DCD do cover a lot of the types of things that we expect you to know when you walk into your defense. So those are things that you should take a look at. But there is also a VCDX defense prep that you can take a look at. You register for that. This is not live online. This is not live, right? This is...
It's out there.
No, it's self-paced though.
So it's self-paced.
It's self-paced. It's not instructor-led.
Yeah, so,
Isn't it free?
At this point in time, yes.
At this point in time?
all right.
I would say that right now that makes sense, because right now it's mostly how to do the stuff, right? Like, if you weren't sure what you needed to do to get it done, we're showing you here.
Right.
Maybe at some time we'd also start including some content. Yeah.
And there also is a VCDX community. You can take a look and see what folks are talking about already. And if you go onto the VCDX page off of certification, there's a directory of VCDXs. And many of them can have their own blogs that you can take a look at. And a lot of them are very, very supportive in other people making their VCDXs. So you can talk to them and get an idea of what they recommend as well. So again, under the communities, we have our VCP, VCAP, and VCDX areas. The blueprints and other things are here, as well as on the main certification website. There are mock exams available for VCP. The DCA is coming.
Yeah, you saw the demo for the DCA. We'll have that posted so that you can review that, right? That's going to really be if you want to call it mock for the DCA, because there's really no way for us to let you go through a simulated environment, but we can at least give you
kind of a click-through of what it would look like to do a couple of these, right?
And the thing about the mock exams is that if specifically for the VCP where you go through and you can answer the questions, it'll give you explanations of why a response might be incorrect. All right, so this is kind of nice. And also, you are allowed multiple retakes, so that if you go through and if you get 50%, and you say, well, let me go study and see if I can do this better the next time, you can retake the mock exam and see how well you do the second time through here. All right, so for those folks who left, they missed the best slide here. We're going to talk discounts. All right, so if you attend one of the recommended VCAP preparation courses between August 30th and November 30th, you will get a 50% off your VCAP exam voucher.